Alright, so I'm going to put the oil manifold in. It is very heavy. I mean, I don't know what very heavy is. It's probably, I don't know, 40, 50 pounds, I guess. It's pretty heavy. So we need to line up the oil O-rings with all the injectors on top. Goes on top. Make sure you put your O-ring in here. That does have an O-ring. And put it on there. We're supposed to try to push it on. You don't want to try to force it on. The last time I did it, I couldn't really get it to just go on. Those O-rings are really pretty tough to get on there. I mean, it might just go smooth now. We'll see. But anyway, it goes on like that. And then you're going to do like a crisscross pattern. So you're going to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Or whatever's in there. What do we got? 2, 4, 6. So you got 12. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Or, oh, I'll show you a picture of it. And I get torqued to 22 foot-pounds, I believe. Oh, I spilled some. All right. Should be on there. Oh, I went right on. Well, lucky that time. So, yeah, so there you go. 1, 2, 3, or something like that. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think that's how it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Something like that. I don't think it's 100% gotta be. You just kind of want to kind of go in a circle. So right here I'm just running through the torque sequence a second time. I like to do it as like a preventative to make sure nothing loosened up. And right here I'm now changing the ICP sensor. It doesn't take a lot of pressure when you torque those down because it's got an O-ring, so you just got to be kind of careful with that. Alright, so I'm going to adjust these brake valve, actuator, pistons, whatever they actually call them. So here's your adjusters. You got one there, one there, one there, one there, one there, and one there. One for each cylinder. This is 6-cylinder at top dead center. So we're going to do cylinders 2, 4, and 6. Then you're going to turn the crank 1 revolution back to top dead center, do 1, 3, and 5. So that's where you're going to find your little actuator is directly below that adjuster. And you're going to go between the top of the rocker arm, or not the rocker arm, but the top of the bridge that's over the valves and the bottom of the piston, and that's going to be set to the 19 thousandths as well. Jam nuts get set to 19 foot-pounds. So we got the valve cover gasket harness doodad. It's supposed to be reusable. I was gonna replace it, and then I priced it. This is $535 for this harness and gasket. So we're gonna take the chance on just using it because, like I said, I didn't have any really running issues. I just had a lot of coolant leaking out of the back of the broken head. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just clean out the inside of these connectors, just oil in them. Use some connector cleaner or electrical cleaner. So these bolts get torqued to 23 foot-pounds. Alright, so I'm gonna put the manifold on. It's gonna torque sequences 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm gonna torque them in 3 steps. 20 foot-pounds, 40 foot-pounds, and then 77 foot-pounds. So I'm putting that bracket on, the engine lifting bracket there, because it's a little easier without the manifold on. I'm just trying to line up the gasket. I think that's kind of a universal gasket. It fits a couple of different years, so you gotta orient it in the correct direction because the middle has a few holes in it that you don't use. And the EGR cooler bracket is part of those bolts that hold it on also hold the EGR cooler on, so you gotta kind of get that on there too. And it's got three bolts in the back of the EGR cooler and a little triangular gasket. Those gaskets are the same ones for all the little three bolt gaskets in that EGR cooler system. So I just kind of bolted it onto the back there to get it kind of ready before we torque it down, because you're going to get really no movement once it's bolted on there with that type of flange. So just kind of move it along to do our torque sequence. I had to actually change the feed to that EGR cooler. The lines were all rusted, and I figured I'd change it while it was all apart. I don't think it was very much. It came in a kit with the 3 pieces and a little rubber hose between them. So like I said, we got that. we're just kind of going along. I didn't put, like I said, I didn't put the turbo on with it all together because it's kind of in the way a little bit, and trying to line it up on the drain is a little difficult, especially trying to hold all of that because it does get pretty heavy with all that on there. So I got a little heat shield back there. Try to put them on as best you can. That heat shield actually has a bolt that runs through it into the side of the head, so you got to actually take that heat shield off before you can get those bolts out to get the EGR cooler off. So right here I'm working on that turbo oil feed line. It was seized onto that fitting and I couldn't get it off. I ended up having to get another turbo line. I mean, I probably could have just left it to begin with, but I thought it was going to be in the way, so I tried to get it off, and it wasn't going well, and I don't know if it was going to seal again, so I just ordered another one. But in the beginning, if I just left it alone and moved it out of the way, it would have been fine. So there I am. I'm changing that feed line to that because they were pretty rusted, or at least the last one that goes up into the EGR cooler is pretty rusted. But it comes as a kit, how they sell it, so I just got the kit. I ended up cutting my hand pretty good on one of those O-rings later on. Not the O-rings, on one of those hose clamps. I was tightening something and I just cut it pretty deep. So putting that fan clutch hub back on, deciding to just assemble the things in the front. So I can put that on and put the pulley and stuff on, and we get the fan. So that bracket right there actually holds the crossover piping from that EGR cooler to the one on the other side. And that's what that little stainless hose, not hose clamp, but the U clamp right there, that's what that's for. So here's the coolant crossover. It's like a series. Coolant goes into that cooler and then it cuts across to the other one. So there's a thermostat I just put in. I had to buy a new thermostat. I completely spaced. I initially tried to order a thermostat, but things were getting lost in communication. So I'm not exactly sure what the torque spec is on those nuts. If those are the variable geometry turbo spiral lock nuts, then it's 52 foot-pounds. I think they're M10s. It looks like it probably is. Oh, let's see. I think those four nuts are 52 foot-pounds. Not exactly sure. I don't know how you're gonna torque them anyway, to be honest, but I don't know. So we're putting on the fan clutch here. I was able to torque those nuts that were on that turbo. I just used a crow's foot, and it actually went pretty easy. I didn't have too much trouble with it. And I just used that impact hammer with chisel bit to kind of tighten that fan clutch again. I went back later and I checked it, and they were actually pretty tight on that. Well, that fan clutch was actually pretty tight, so I didn't have any issues using the air hammer. So right here I'm hooking up the top radiator hose tube. I did have to buy another rubber fitting that goes into the radiator off of that tube, because they use those heat shrink clamps on there, and it sat on there so long that it deformed it and it wouldn't seal right with hose clamps. So I ordered another piece of hose there, and I also got some hose clamps that they substitute instead of those heat shrink hose clamps. So putting that water outlet back on. I actually had a hard time getting the gasket for that. The guy couldn't seem to locate it, but he ended up getting it at the end. Actually kind of surprised that he didn't really know what I was talking about and had such difficulty at an international dealer, because this engine is like their bread and butter engine. It's in everything, as far as I know anyway. It's in all town stuff. But I think they're kind of phasing. Most people are getting like the Cummins. When we order new trucks, I request them with the Cummins engine in them, because I don't have trouble with the Cummins engine like I do with the international engines. That truck just works. So I'd prefer the Cummins engine personally. So just hooking up the harnesses and stuff and putting things back on, and just kind of trying to remember where everything went, and making sure all the stuff gets put back together correctly. Making a small pile out of a big pile of parts. So, like I said, just putting the alternator bracket back on. For some reason, I think I probably don't have it in here, but for some reason I think I had to take that back off or something, or do something. I forgot something, and I had to kind of go back, because I can't remember everything. And oh, you know what it was? The belt tensioner right there. I didn't put it on correctly, because the belt like runs through it, and you can't get it on there without taking it off. So I had to take it back off to feed the belt through. You can see right there it's fed through differently, or actually right here I'm doing it. Yeah, there's just not enough space between the timing cover and that pulley to get it in there. So hooking up the alternator cables here, cleaning them up a little bit. They weren't really bad. You got to be careful. You don't want to really take off the tin coating or whatever that coating is. I think it's tin, because you kind of remove the anti-corrosion when you do it. So that's why I was just using the Scotch-Brite there, just to kind of take off the little bit of stuff on there. So I'm tightening the hose clamps and things, just little stuff here and there, kind of trying to figure out what to do next. Intake, or our charge air pipe, whatever you call it. All right, so if you're doing a head swap, you got to pay attention to the size of the fitting that's inside, or the size of the bore that's in the head for the high pressure oil line fitting. This is a bigger bore than was on the original head, so I had to get the new fitting for that, which also corresponds to getting the bigger size hose, which also means that you have to get the bigger fitting for this end here too. So it's something to consider or be aware of when you're doing this, is you may have to change this entire high pressure oil line as well. The only way to get this fitting out here is to take this fuel pump off that's below it, because it will not spin. So something else to keep in mind is they get these little rubber O-rings on these hard lines, and they use them right back until, I don't know, the earlier engines, the DT466E, I think 96, or whenever they came out with the DT466E, when they stopped using the mechanical pump and they started using the Huey system, it's going to have these O-rings on there. They do break down, they do crack, and they will allow air to get in. I think they're like $5 a piece from from the dealer. So I just got a handful of them. That's kind of what they look like. The one that was still on there, I was contemplating not changing, but I thought, you know what, I'll just change them all to change them all. And this is what it looked like. So it was already damaged and it started to deteriorate. So like I say, that can allow air to come in and cause issues. So I would recommend changing those as well. Yeah, so there's, I think this engine only had 3 of them on there, and then this one's got like a flat face O-ring fitting. So like I say, that fitting there is just a flat face O-ring, and then the rest are the compression ends. So I'm just kind of starting to reassemble the fuel system. So I put that line on, and I had to tighten down the bolts for the fuel pump there before I can put the fuel filter housing on, because you can't really get at it once it's once this stuff's on there. So there was also some wiring and stuff that was tucked up underneath that was on the studs on the intake that had to be put back on too. So right here I'm just kind of tightening up the bolts there on the fuel filter housing. I think there was 4 of them. So I got all those snug down. I'm going to torque them right now. I prefer to torque as much as I can, just because then I know it's done right, and at least I have an arguing point if something fails to say, well, I did it how I was supposed to do it, and that's kind of how I do it. So even if it's for just deniability and knowing that I did it the way I was supposed to, if something goes wrong, I can at least say I did my best. So I was finished hooking up some of the fuel lines, harnesses, connectors, just little things, one step at a time. Get that front line on. So right there I was cleaning out the hole where the fuel line plugs in there. There's like an O-ring on there that's got a seal, and I think there was some corrosion or something in there, so I had to clean that out, make sure there's nothing in there. I was going to keep it from sealing, right? Just right there I'm cleaning off the oil and stuff that kind of leaked down onto the engine and air compressor. And just scraping off. With all the aluminum stuff, you get like this little corrosive film and stuff on there. It's just like just a little bit of raised stuff. So I like to kind of scrape it all down just to keep from having issues with anything sealing. Especially like when you have like EGR system and then the DPF system, they're all pretty pressure sensitive. So if you got leaks and stuff, you're gonna have issues with things doing what they're supposed to do. So right here, getting that EGR cooler kind of lined back up. It's kind of got to be just right to have everything fit the way it's supposed to fit. I mean, you do have some forgiveness with some of the boots, and then with the hose clamps and stuff there. So you do get a little bit of wiggle room, but you don't get a lot, and it's a little tricky to get it back in the way it came out. Like right here, I kind of had some trouble getting that front pipe to seal right. So it's just, like I say, I mean, you get a little bit of wiggle room, but it's a little tricky. and there is like some torque procedure for installing these. You're supposed to tighten the bands, loosen them, and do a couple of different things to kind of get it in there right. It's right there, I'm torquing them. And then once you torque them, I think you gotta loosen them up, and then you gotta torque them to a lesser value after that, I believe. It's that little hose clamp that's right on the top of the EGR cooler that comes from the pipe that runs to the other side. I actually forgot to tighten that. It's on there, but like I said, I never ended up tightening it, and then I filled the engine up with coolant and stuff, and I ended up having a bit of a leak there that I noticed after, because once it was full of coolant, it actually held vacuum too with the vacuum filler, and so I filled it up, and then I just all of a sudden a little while later I saw a drip under it where it had just filled up totally, and it was dripping out of there. So I ended up finding it pretty quickly and tightening it up. So that right there is obviously the intake piping coming from the charge air cooler. Got a bunch of hoses and stuff on this. It was pretty time consuming to get everything all put back on. I mean, the actual engine part wasn't really that big of a deal. It was just all the emissions and all the hoses and everything on top of it that really was the time consuming issue. So if it wasn't for that, it would have went a lot faster. So we got our cowl and stuff we're putting back on, and just kind of getting to the end of the run here. Getting our wipers back on. Our air box back on. There was a sensor on that air box. Alright, so there's that mess of crap done. So I just gotta put the fenders on and the liners. Yeah, it should be good. I'll change the oil, fill it up with coolant. I will vacuum fill this with coolant because of the EGR coolers and stuff. And then I'll start it up, and I'll show you the startup. Alright, so I'm gonna let that run out there for a little while, let it warm up, then I'm gonna check the coolant level, make sure it isn't really dropping. I did vacuum fill the cooling system. I don't know if it's completely necessary on that generation because it looks like coolant lines come out the top of the EGR coolers. So I mean, you might be able to get away without vacuum filling it. So like I said, I'm gonna let it run, let it bleed the air out of the system, bleed the air out of the oil manifold and stuff, and just let's say let it warm up and stuff. So anyway, that's about how you do that in fast motion. I couldn't really think of a way to do the video that wasn't a time lapse because it just takes too long, and it would just take forever. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section and I'll try to answer whatever questions I can answer. So anyway, hope that can help somebody. Thanks for watching.